All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, building community, inspiring growth, creating change. Here in the heart of Kansas City, we come together to create this hour of shared reflection so that we might be renewed in courage for these times and inspired to lives of greater dignity, higher purpose, deeper generosity, and more effective action. If you are new to Unitarian Universalism or to our congregation, we want to get to know you and share part of your journey. If this place is already your spiritual home, welcome once more. We need one another, and it is good to be together again. Because we care for one another's safety, our congregation is gathering online during this long season of coronavirus pandemic. Nevertheless, through the gifts of technology, we continue to celebrate community and connections as we lean into the values of justice, compassion, and reason. Together, we learn the love that has the power to overcome both loneliness in the heart and oppression in the world. Welcome to our service this morning. May the words and music and images that we offer today nourish our best selves, calling forth abundant wisdom and love. Arise, O souls, arise. Good morning, and welcome to All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church of Kansas City as we gather online this first Sunday in March 2021. Today we are pleased to welcome to our pulpit our longtime friend and my colleague, the Reverend Jim Lewis, who was a member of our congregation when he discerned a call to ministry and undertook his preparation at Starr King School in Berkeley, California. He was ordained in February of 2020 and has recently moved to the East Coast with his partner. Our congregation is proud to have been part of his ministerial formation, and we look forward to his message this morning. Welcome back, Jim.
Good morning, All Souls. My name is Reverend Jim Lewis, and it's so good to be back at a congregation where I got to spend almost 10 years of my time as a member. It is wonderful to be with you, and amidst so many other things going on in our world, one of the things I'm grateful for is that technology can allow me and others to transport ourselves magically into places where it would be hard to be physically. So I'm grateful to be here this morning, especially a morning where I'm going to be talking about the idea of legacy, and knowing that All Souls has been a part of my legacy, a part of my history, a part of my upbringing as a Unitarian Universalist. So I'm so grateful to be with you this morning. Our opening words today are from Reverend Linda Susan Ulrich, entitled, "Open Up the Doors." Open up the doors. Push on looming wooden arches embroidered with ironwork. Brace shoulders against the weight of history unmoved. Slough off the musty smell of unused joy and stored up sorrow. Knock rust off the hinges if you have to, and let your breath precede you inside. Open the doors more. Make room for a shaft of sunlight to cross the threshold. Give the dust mote something to dance about. Peek through a single slice of possibility and name even the half-hidden truths you see. Open the doors wider still. Pour yourself through the gap. Strut or sneak or sidle as suits you best. Cleanse whatever scrapes catch your skin, and bind up the wounds that keep you from entering whole. Open the doors as far as they will go. Draw on the strength of the stones beneath you. Ground yourself in a firm sense of who you are. Stand as a beacon welcoming the next seeker, and shine far beyond the lintel and sill. Open all that you are. Heighten and deepen your connections to the world around you. Broaden your definition of neighbor. Grow into the largest target for grace that you can muster, and pray to become a gateway for even greater love and compassion. Open up the doors, my friends, lest we keep the stranger out and condemn ourselves to prisons of our own making. Good morning and welcome to worship.
We light our chalice this morning in a city where once again this week the decision has been made that a white police officer who killed an unarmed black driver in the course of what began as a traffic stop will be subject to no official consequences. It will be a year this week since KCPD officer Blaine Newton concluded that Donnie Sanders was speeding, followed his car into an alley, and shot him 3 times, ending his life. Jackson County prosecutors have determined that there is insufficient evidence to charge Newton with a crime. And so this killing becomes yet another strand in the fabric of trauma and rage, of distrust and inequity that weaves around our city, strangling hope. We light our chalice this morning in witness, because no community can change what it will not see, because we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. There have been sporadic local protests about the killing of Donnie Sanders, but we are weary as a nation, as a city, depleted by the pandemic, exhausted by the repeated miscarriage of justice in our society. We are weary, and another white man still carries a weapon and a badge, and another black man is dead. May this chalice flame burn in our hearts with the heat of anger for what we know is not right, with the clarity that discerns patterns of oppression and will not look away, with the scalding grief of mothers who bury their sons and babies who grow up without fathers. May this chalice flame illuminate our covenant community with the fire of commitment, so that we may see what is before our eyes, speak the truth of history and outrage, and walk the long walk toward equal justice for all our neighbors. Let us now share with one another in the chat where that flame burns for us. Now let's join together in speaking once again our covenant promises to this community. Together we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
I think God's and Buddhist fart.
I am Sarah, and I am 10 years old.
I'm 4, and I'm Toby.
By law, I'm Jewish, but I don't know if I necessarily believe in it.
I believe in Buddhism. I believe in God.
For me, it's a really big maybe. Part of me believes in God a lot, and a part of me definitely doesn't. Because maybe there is someone upstairs, making great things happen and sprinkling magic on the world. And then you see such bad stuff happen, and you see kids get cancer, and you're like, you doubt or you question God.
We have this thing called Gunyam. It's kind of like God, but it's like Chinese.
In my religion, we call him Allah.
He helps people. God is love. I think God has a sweet, soft voice.
I think he would sound like Hoi.
I think since he's lived so long, it's kind of washed out. I should make good things happen to the world. This sounds so creepy, like a horror movie.
I think it sounds loud. He sounds like really kind, I think. Well, hello? You can see him on the ground, on his legs, and on his feet. I think God is in the sky. I pray to the Gunyam to bring us good luck and support my family. Usually what I wish for, I'd like to spend time with my mom all day.
I want to have confidence in God. If they control all of us, I want to have confidence that I don't need to pray and tell them to do it. I think they should make great things happen and really prevent the really bad, terrible things.
One time I went outside and I prayed to God for I could have flowers.
If there is a God, what is it? Like, what do they look like?
God looks like a person.
Maybe God's a woman, or maybe God doesn't identify as a gender.
They're usually gold or white. I think God will have green eyes.
Why do I always think of him wearing a hoodie?
I'm drawing him clothes. I don't really know if he has clothes because I can't draw him naked.
I was wearing his masculine God t-shirt. Gotta put that God on there.
Put some jewelry on his head.
He's in his hoodie, so we're not gonna be able to see his hair, guys. I don't think he has hair. I think, it's hard to keep having hair if you've been alive for, this many millions of years. He's kind of self-conscious about not having hair.
This one's shaped like a monkey.
I just would hope that he would look like a regular person.
God is a big head on legs. His hands are very long and big. I know how to make hands, really. Like this circle. Because my hands are circles, see?
I don't think he looks like anyone I know.
I think he wears, those swag green pants. Very cool green pants, make him a little more colorful. He's got those sick Nikes on.
He has a beard.
He has orange hair and green eyes. He's big, and he always sits down. He looks kind of funny.
He has a blue shirt and blue pants and very hairy arms.
I just would like you to think of God, a man or a woman or whatever you want to think of God as, happiness. You should have a big smile when you think of God. And wearing those sick Nikes,
Thank you for letting me be in this world.
World goes round because all these different people have different beliefs in God, and I love that. But I don't think that their belief should cause wars. This could be someone fiction. This could be someone man-made. I love that everyone has a different view of God and different beliefs in God, but I don't think it should cause so much commodity or a war. I really don't.
Each of us thinks about God and religion in our own way, depending on our culture, education, personality, and all the subtle influences of our life experiences. But one thing is clear to all of us. Whatever is holy at the heart of life calls us to generosity and sharing. We are meant to help one another. In this congregation, we believe that part of our task is to build a beloved community that illustrates how humanity might all dwell together in peace. We ask for your support of the institution which exists to create space for that beloved community to flourish, to serve the needs of our neighbors, and to nurture each other and our children in the faith of freedom, reason, and compassion. Your contributions make the work of this community possible and sustain our message of hope in these challenging times. In this awareness, our offering for this morning will now be gratefully received. let's say together the words of dedication for our offering. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society.
These are excerpts from Unitarian minister Dr. George Dodson's article, Clear Thinking or Death, in 1921, stating, of course, a belief in God is central to Unitarianism. This was not the beginning of that conversation, but it did start a conversation in the Unitarian newspaper at the time, the Christian Register. We have assumed, and were justified in the assumption, that in our use of liberty, we had a common faith in God and man, and that our churches were formed for worship and communion with God. With practical unanimity, Unitarians throughout their history have held a rational faith, which has actually been the basis of their fellowship, though they have refused formally to require it. This has naturally puzzled our religious neighbors. How indeed could they be expected to understand us when we declared our faith to be without content, when all the while that content was so generally held that we never thought of doubting it? Now, however, we find that theism is being denied by men who speak as representatives of our movement and who feel that they have the right to do so, since we stand for nothing but the liberty to stand for anything, or for nothing at all. Please observe that I am not raising an issue. All that seems clear is that we must avow our faith in God, even though the statement of that faith may remind us of a creed.
This is an excerpt from one response from well-known Humanist Unitarian minister Curtis Reese in the Letters to the Editor section of the Christian Register later in 1921. You may agree with all, some, or none of what he says, but he was one of the main advocates for humanism within Unitarianism. Quote, "Religion is the way we relate ourselves to the values we find or create, not what we believe about the ultimate nature of the universe. Theism is a respectable philosophical hypothesis, nothing more. Hardly any two theists could agree on a definition of terms, nor could the humanists for that matter. What kind of theism are we to avow? Monistic? Pluralistic? Realistic? It's a bit hazardous to style a man an atheist for not accepting a purely philosophical hypothesis. If by atheism is meant the denial of a power greater than oneself, then there are no atheists. Theism is philosophically possible, but not religiously necessary."
our sermon this morning, In Every Generation. So there I was, teaching music to 5th grade students in Kansas City, Missouri, probably about 10 years ago now, I'd say. This day we were starting to learn about drum circles and creating music communally through improvisation. I look across the circle, and there's one of my students, with his arms pulled up into his shirt, wiggling around in a goofy manner. I say to him, okay, put your arms back in your shirt. And he says, okay, Mr. Lewis. Now I turn to look again as we're going on, and he has changed the way he's wearing his shirt so that just his hands are poking out from his shirt sleeves. All right, I say, put your arms in your sleeves. But they are. Put your whole arm in your sleeve. Okay. And I turn to continue teaching, and the drum has finally reached him in a minute after that, and somehow he has folded up his arms entirely so they are filling each of his short sleeves, like, kind of like a wing motion, but like his little elbows sticking out the end of the sleeve. And at this point, I just keel over with laughter because there's nothing else to do. There's nothing else to do at this point. And I say, put your arms in your sleeves correctly, please, in between laughing fits. And he says, oh, why didn't you just say that in the first place? He says, and he puts on the shirt correctly. And these were the days as a teacher I would ask myself, what am I doing here? What effect am I going to have? And what will be my legacy with these students? I admit I had no idea. And I bring this story up today because as I reflect on Unitarian and Universalist heritage, history, and where we are today, I think about the moments that have influenced our legacy and the religion we have become. Now, for instance, one of my favorite moments from specifically Unitarian history is the Humanist Theist controversy. So here's a little bit of this history. Gotta give you a little backstory. Back in the 1800s, people were migrating across the United States, and Unitarian missionaries were sent to minister to them. Yes, indeed, we had missionaries. It was thought by the Unitarian leaders that the future of Unitarianism was to be decided in the West, and in ways it kind of was. Those leaders knew, with other religions expanding westward, in order to be relevant, Unitarianism also had to expand. Now, these leaders might not have been able to predict, though, that this denomination of liberal Christians would become more and more liberal as they moved across the country. Ideas like transcendentalism, put forth by one-time Unitarian minister Ralph Waldo Emerson, would be met with much dispute back in the East, but the Midwest and West Coast would take these ideas on more readily. Unitarians in the West would form their own association at that time, separate from the more conservative Unitarians on the East Coast. The Free Religious Association formed, a group of Unitarians who believed that we should not be following Christ, but rather his principles, quote, truth, righteousness, and love. They believed that religion and science could be reconciled. So there was a lot of fear in 1894 as the Unitarians held their national conference and reworked the preamble to their organizational constitution. Some people needed to hear that all Unitarians were Christians. Others outright opposed the idea, and in the end it was solved by saying that these churches, quote, work for the kingdom of God and, quote, accept the religion of Jesus, but that we are, quote, congregational in tradition and policy, and, quote, therefore nothing in this Constitution is to be construed as an authoritative test. In other words, they were all Christian, but if you weren't, They couldn't enforce Christianity upon you, and neither would they. These conversations were not easy, they were not comfortable, but they happened because people made a choice to speak out for the need for a more inclusive statement of faith. Now we're going to fast forward a few years, and these theological questions have continued to percolate within Unitarianism until they came to a head once again in 1921, 100 years ago now, in the Unitarian newspaper, The Christian Register. You heard some readings from it earlier today. This was part of what would later be called the Humanist Theist controversy. Throughout most of the year, there had been this heated debate in the Christian Register between the humanists and the theists. Someone of one belief would write an article, then everyone would put their opinions out there in the letters to the editor section. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to read through these newspapers and was struck by how much they reminded me of a modern-day political post on social media. Now, if anybody out there is not on social media, I think many of you know what I'm talking about at this point in 2021, that political conversations on social media can get very heated, sometimes very angry, and always very passionate. So they can be challenging, especially if you're trying to do them in a tone of love and relationship and relationality between people, and kind of keep relationships in a good place by the end of the conversation. It can be very challenging. Anyway, in this controversy, in the letters to the editor section, Charles Dodson, who's a theist, started the conflict with a scathing article called Clear Thinking or Death, a little dramatic, in which he informs the reader how ridiculous it would be if humans were allowed to have a say in Unitarian theology. They must be a small minority of our faith, because Unitarians are definitely Christian. He claimed that he was not, quote, raising an issue, but it was the humanists who were pushing this theological debate to the forefront. John Dietrich, another Unitarian minister, was a focal point of Dodson's frustrations. Dietrich had spoken of his humanist ministry at the National Conference the year before as the responsibility of people to bring beauty to the world. And while he had no proof that God existed, he didn't deny the existence of a higher power. He claimed the label humanist, but said he was neither a theist nor an atheist. Those labels didn't express his faith and his beliefs. In the course of the humanist-theist controversy, there were many good theological conversations. Some people reminded us that Unitarians are congregational, so if one congregation decides to hire a humanist minister to speak mostly to that point, they were free to do so. Others questioned whether or not it was time for Unitarians to adopt a creed that officially supports Christianity. Many argued the merits of one theology over another. Now, eventually, after a whole lot of argument and even some name-calling, the words heretic and heretic hunter were used more than once. This controversy subsided, and humanists and theists existed together within Unitarianism. And I will admit, I'm still doing some research to find out the exact wiggly bits of how things kind of came to be a little more peaceful. Now, you'll note from this reading from Curtis Reese earlier that we today may or may not even agree with everything that was considered humanism at that time. In fact, even for those attending today, I'll bet, even among those of us who would call themselves humanists, there may be several definitions of what humanist means. While humanist historical figures such as Dietrich and Reese may or may not have believed in a concept of God, they helped create a space within our faith tradition for people who don't believe in God. I think it's also possible that this debate eventually made it easier for those who are Buddhist, Muslim, Jewish, have earth-centered beliefs, and other traditions to find space within Unitarian Universalism, to join in community and congregation. They altered the path of our faith tradition. This is what I see as part of the beauty of our living tradition. We are not a static faith. We are ready for new ideas, new ways of being, I might even say new revelations in how we practice our faith, even if those new ideas sometimes lead to some frustration or conversation. That's why I love going back far enough in history to see events like the Humanist Theist controversy, because Dodson, Dietrich, Rees, and others made challenges and choices which shifted how people could be accepted in Unitarianism and Unitarian Universalism. And, of course, that's not the end of the story. Over the coming decades, more humanists would see their belief as excluding the possibility of deity, as lifting up logic and science, and making the statement that God could not exist. Also, humanism would become a prevailing way of belief within our faith tradition. But in 2003, Reverend Bill Sinkford gave a sermon encouraging Unitarian Universalists to reclaim and reintegrate language of reverence into our faith. His sermon sparked a conversation that continues in Unitarian Universalist churches throughout our denomination, discovering and rediscovering how we can practice this religion we call Unitarian Universalism. Now, there's a minister by the name of Reverend Kendyl Gibbons, and she has even written some wise words on how it may be important to create new words and new ways of expressing reverence in relation to that sermon from Bill Sinkford. At least that's what I've seen and heard from this wonderful wise minister named Reverend Kendyl Gibbons. Anyway, Reverend Sinkford's sermon saw some conflict arise because some people assumed that in advocating for language of reverence, he was advocating for a full return to everybody being Christian in Unitarian Universalism. And that wasn't his point. He was advocating that language of reverence helps us tune into whatever is deeper for each of us. Dietrich and Sinkford had perspectives on what makes our faith what it could be. And while their ideas spoke to different points, and were sometimes by some people seen to be in conflict, they were both moving us towards openness, inclusion, and spiritual depth, shifting how we practice in hopes of creating a fuller, more welcoming, beloved community. For many of us, their work and the work of many others created this space that has felt like such a good fit for so many of us. A religious tradition which welcomed us when our beliefs might not have fit anywhere else. A space where we could feel at home in our fully realized identity. And here's what I'm thinking about a complex part of the idea of legacy. In ways, it's less a static piece of history and more constantly intersecting and flowing through time. Like in my story about teaching at the beginning of the sermon, I realized with some thought that part of my legacy at that school, when I was asking myself, what am I doing here? What's my legacy? Part of my legacy at that school was an attitude of compassion towards the students and building those relationships with the students. And that's something that returning students would speak about when they came back to see me. But that student in the drum circle with the sleeves and the comedy, his legacy of humor and humanity impacted me. His legacy impacted what my legacy has brought. He encouraged me to be more lighthearted about things that weren't so serious. And that has brought more humor and more joy into my ministry. I don't know that he knows that he did that or that he will ever know that he did that, but he did. his legacy has impacted the legacy that I will bring into this life. In that way, we as Unitarian Universalists are both constantly impacted by the legacy left for us and creating something that will impact those that come after us. That's why I was overjoyed to see movement towards inclusivity and change in Unitarian Universalism in the past few years. Some examples. After being asked to reimagine a more inclusive name for Standing on the Side of Love campaign, one that more fully embraced people with disabilities, the campaign changed its name to Side with Love. Another example. Towards examining racism in UU institutions, a review commission is considering addition of an 8th principle, stating the need to dismantle racism and oppressions in our church and culture. Additionally, the work of the Committee on Institutional Change's 2020 report gave us a frank look at this topic and how it plays out in our churches and communities. And one more example. At GA in 2016, a vote changed words in our sources of faith so that instead of affirming and promoting the words and deeds of prophetic women and men, it became the words and deeds of prophetic people. This has supported and encouraged conversations about how to be more inclusive of those who identify beyond the gender binary within our movement. These changes are not always comfortable for everyone. They do ask us to examine how we can be more expansive in our inclusivity and the way it interacts in our faith. To love more, to shift our living tradition in ways that embrace humanity more fully. This is not always the easy path. It would be easier to stay static and unchanging. But we, I believe, are called to more. May we continue growing, speaking up, having conversations, and loving deeply, developing this living tradition into tomorrow and beyond. May we continue to create a legacy that is more transformative for the Unitarian Universalism of those who will come after us. Amen and blessed be. Our closing words today are from Eric Walker Wickstrom. The purpose of this community is to help its people grow. If you are who you were, and if the person next to you is who they were, if none of us has changed since the day we came in here, we have failed. The purpose of this community, of any church, temple, zendo, mosque, is to help its people grow. We do this through encounters with the unknown, in ourselves, in one another, in the other, whoever that might be for us, however hard that might be, because these encounters have many gifts to offer. So may you go forth from here this morning, not who you were, but who you could be. So may we all. Bless you, bless your day, and bless your coming week as you go into the world and grow and be.
Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual words of love.
Thanks to our good friend Jim Lewis for that thoughtful message. It was good to have you with us, Jim, and we continue to take pride in your ministry. Thanks also to each of you for being with us this morning. Now we invite you to join us for informal conversation and fellowship in our Community Connections Zoom room. You can find the link in the chat here or on our All Souls website homepage. Remember to sign up for your St. Patty's Day Sunday Plus meal next week. The deadline is today. We hope you will plan to be with us next week as we observe the anniversary of our last in-person Sunday service, honor the losses of the past year, and celebrate the resiliency that has kept us afloat on the tides of history. We will also hear some helpful thoughts from the UU Trauma Response Ministry. In the meantime, please everybody, get your vaccine as soon as you can. Take care, stay safe, and be well this week.